Hello and welcome to the Focused Layout Update Part 2, the board. I'm Bob McFarlane, the software developer on the Save the Cat team. I'm going to take you through some exciting new features we've added to the board. Before we get started, if you haven't watched Part 1 in this series, I would recommend that you pause here and watch it first. It's not critical, but it will give you a little more insight into what you'll be seeing here. Okay, let's get started. First, I'll open my project and I'll select the Board tab. This is a brand new project, so the beat cards and several other key scene cards have been added for you. I do want to touch on a feature that was added some time ago that you may or may not be aware of. That is the auto align feature for the scene cards on the board. This feature calculates the width of the board so that no cards overlap. Now, some of the beats, such as the opening image, only cover one page, and so the cards won't overlap. The width of the beat needs to be the standard width of a scene card, plus a little extra so that you can move another card into the beat if you want to. Then, in beats that cover more than one page and have multiple scene cards in them, those cards will be spaced within the beat so they each have about the same amount of space within the beat. Let me demonstrate what that means for you. I'll slide the board over so we can see this setup section here. Notice we have 3 cards in that beat. If I drag the setup work card a little to the left and drop it, it snaps back to where it was. So like I said, it spaces the cards in the beat so they each have the same amount of space. This also means that if there are so many cards within a beat that they will not fit without overlapping, the width of the entire board will need to be adjusted so that those cards won't overlap within that beat. I'll show you what I mean. I'll scroll back so we can see the opening image. Then, just for demonstration purposes, I'll drag the setup card into the opening image beat. Notice that the opening image section grew wider so that both cards could fit side by side. That also means that the width of the board had to be made proportionally wider. And going the other way, if I drag the setup card back into the setup beat, the opening image section is resized for the one card, and the width of the board was adjusted accordingly. If you don't want to use the auto align feature, you can turn it off in Preferences under the Save the Cat menu. If you want to turn it off for all future projects, go into the Master Preferences, then Preference Settings. If you only want to turn it off for the current project, do that under the Project Preferences, like this. Now when I move the scene card, it simply stays where I place it, and the size of the beat sections in the board don't get resized. So you have options, so set it the way that works best for you. All right, let's get into the new features in this update. The board is mainly used to lay out your scenes in the best order to tell your story, but the board is also used to track a character's arc or what is happening at a particular location at different places in the story. You can even track setups and payoffs through your story. Maybe extra clues are added along the way. So how do you add something to the board? Just double-click on the board. A list of everything you could possibly add pops up. Well, let's first add a scene. The scene drops in where you double-clicked. Then you can move it wherever you want. Remember that I happen to have the auto align feature turned off so the card doesn't snap into place. Sometimes you may have several scenes that make up a chase scene, for example. Instead of having all of those scenes on the board, you can combine them into a sequence. So let's add a sequence. I'll double-click on the board, then click on Add Sequence. In this case, a list pops up with a list of all my sequence types. You can manage these in Preferences. I'll go ahead and drag a chase sequence onto the board, and next I'll drag a scene and drop it over the sequence. I'm asked if I want to add it to the sequence, so I'll click Yes, and it's now part of the sequence. As you can see, there's one scene in the sequence. Drop as many scenes onto it as you like. Now while we're talking about it, if you want to delete the sequence, click the keyboard icon. If you've been using Save the Cat for a while, you'll notice something different. Clicking on the keyboard icon used to simply open the sequence or scene card in the detail view. Now it gives you options. It's much easier now to delete an item or move it to the litter box. You no longer have to use Control-Drag to accomplish that. So I'll click Delete. A confirmation message will pop up asking what you want to do with the scenes in the sequence. You can move them to the litter box or return them to the board. I'll return them to the board. And the scene is back on the board. Okay, I'll close the sequence list. Now let's add a character. I'll double-click on the board again, then click on Plot Character Stories. The list of all the characters pops up. I'll drag the professor to the board, and when I drop her where I want her, immediately a window opens where I can type a description of what's happening with the professor at this point in the story. I'm going to go ahead and close the characters list. Now I'm going to click on the keyboard for this character to show you another option you have with what I call board entities. Board entities are any entity like a character, a location, a thing, a setup, a payoff that you drop on the board. You can see the new option to duplicate this board entity. I'll click it. And again. I've just quickly created a couple of extra cards for this character that I can move to another part of the story. I can also double click on the card to quickly open it for editing like this. All right, I'll change the description to Given an Award. I'll just click the X to close it. If you don't want to save the change you just made, just hit the Escape key. Now I won't bore you by adding a location, a thing, a relationship, because they all work the same. But I do want to add a setup though, so you can see another small change we've made in this update. There we go. Now notice the card has the setup icon on it. Previously, the cards for setups and payoffs didn't have an image to help you distinguish whether it was a setup or a payoff. If you set an image for the setup or payoff, that'll be displayed just like the character images. Now if that's not enough, I want to show you something else you can do. I'll double click on the board and select Plot Character Stories to open the list of characters. Now scenes will have characters in them. If you have the Premium or Pro version, scenes can also have things and relationships linked to them. A scene can also have a location linked to it so you know where it is taking place. And now that I think about it, a scene can have setups and payoffs linked to it as well. So it's very easy to add a character to a scene. Just drag it from the list and drop it onto the scene, like this. Okay, I'll close the character list and open the locations list. Now I don't have to close the character list before opening the locations list. I'm just closing it to get it out of the way. All right, I'll drag the location onto the scene, click OK, and close the locations list. Now just for fun, let's add a setup to the scene. I'll open the setups list. I'll drag this setup and drop it onto the scene. Now when I click the keyboard icon for a scene, look what you get. You can see the location, the characters, and the setup. If you want to jump into the details for any of those items, click on it like this. Now I'm in the detail view for Mr. Muskie. If I click on the Boards tab, I can see the board and every place where Mr. Muskie is included. Pretty handy. A great way to see every place your character appears in your story. All right, I'll close the detail view. One more thing you can add to the board is a label. This is kind of a freeform note. I'll double click and select Add Label, and the list of the types of labels I have configured pops up. I'll drag Stunt to the board. I'll type in a description of the stunt and save it. You can resize labels by dragging the bottom right corner around like this. And now that I've mentioned that, let me mention that you can also resize scene cards the same way, like this. The entity cards, such as for a character or setup, are sized according to how much text you've typed in for your description, and the number of lines of text you have configured in Preferences. Let's take a quick look at that. I'll click the Save the Cat menu, the Project Preferences, then Preference Settings. Then under Max Lines of Text for Entity Cards, you can see the options you have. I have 3 lines selected. Let's see how that looks. There we go. And when I save it, the card is resized but only shows the first 3 lines. That way, if you get a little long-winded, you won't have these super tall cards covering everything up. All right, one more thing and we're done. Before I started recording this video, I had some character cards on the board that I moved to the litter box. I've now decided that I want one of them back on the board. I'll click the litter box icon here to open the litter box. You can see a couple of character cards in there. The first one is in the opening image beat section, and the other one is in the setup. When you send something to the litter box, where it was on the board is stored so you know where it came from. I'll just drag the first one back to the board and place it where I want it. As you can see, it's been removed from the litter box and is now back on the board. Well, those are the new features that will make using the board much easier for you. If you have the Pro Edition, be sure to check out the 3rd video in this series to see what's new for you. If you have any questions, contact me at tech@blakesnyder.com, and thanks for watching.